So now we'll call on our brother Brian to lead us in the third session, which he entitles The Singers and the Sons of Asaph. Brother Brian.
Thanks, Ron. Now, Brother Scaramastro made easy deal of that difficult chapter, didn't he? It's one of those that we used to remember when we were going through with the children. That was very difficult when you get to that section for them to climb their way through all of those names, especially He-Man's 14 sons. Did you notice the variety he had there? It must have been quite an exercise for his wife to think up a new name, when you've got 14 sons. But when you look at those names, you'd rather think that he had a fair vocab. He didn't seem to run out, did he? I actually want to turn back a chapter or two, back to chapter 23, and give you just the, at least the bones of this chapter. And then chapter 24, which is, of course, in between, we will deal with when we deal with the special officers of David later. But here's David with an insurrection in the environment in which he's living. He's just come through the time of Adonijah's attempt to take the throne. And yet look what this man gets up to. In verse 2 of chapter 23, it says, he gathered together all the princes of Israel with the priests and the Levites. And you might think, well, if he's reorganizing the Levites, the priests and the Levites, why then has he bothered about getting all the princes together as well? Well, David really had a sense. He really had an excellent sense of the greater occasion. He knew how to put a thing together to have its maximum effect upon people. And sometimes in ecclesial life, you'll find that a person, he knows how to organise an event so that it really comes home with impression. David had that undoubted ability. He could sense the value of a matter. He could sense how to bring it home to people. For example, in a similar kind, look at chapter 24 and verse 6. It says there, and Shemaiah, the son of Nethanel the scribe, one of the Levites, wrote them before the king and the princes and Zadok the priest, and Ahimelech the son of Abiathar, and before the chief of the fathers of the priests and Levites. Now what they're doing is setting out the names of the different sons of Eliezer and Ithamar who would be in the 24 courses of the priests. But he didn't do it just sort of in the back room, did he, where no one was aware. These men were being inducted into their office, and it was done with due procedure. He's a very clever man, very astute king. And so in verse 6 it describes a little scene. You can see all these very important people, all there. And each one of these then is called by name, and their name is written down before the king and the princes and Zadok the priest and Ahimelech the son of Abiathar, and before the chief of the fathers of the priests and Levites. In other words, he was giving great occasion to their appointment. They were not to see their office just as another thing. Now, there's something about that in ecclesial life. Just another example before we broaden that out. Look at chapter 25 and verse 1. Moreover, David and the captains of the host separated to the service of the sons of Asaph and of Heman and Jeduthun. Did you notice anything when we were going past that reading? I mean, brothers and sisters, what have the generals of the army, when it says the captains of the host, we're talking about Joab, Abishai with his bulging biceps, mighty men, Benaiah, you wouldn't hesitate to take on a lion. What's there out there with what we might call the secretary of the singing class, Asaph and Heman and Jeduthun? They are singers. Whatever has it got to do with it? That he should bring their induction of office into the company of the captains of the host. He knew a few things, didn't he? He was a very astute person. And he could see that people might discredit, perhaps, the office of those who were singing and making music. And so he brought out the great strength of the empire, and he put them there in front of them, and these young boys that came up, 24 that we've read of today, and were put into their offices, and they received their office in the presence of these great and well-known, renowned soldiers of the realm. and they had to do respect unto them. Because, in fact, there was greater power in their office than there was in the office of the generals of the army. He's a very wise person, wasn't he? You know, sometimes in ecclesial life, we miss that point. Somebody's going to be appointed to a certain committee and you're busy at an AB meeting and a whole lot of things on the agenda, and so, oh yes, somebody else for that committee. Okay, yeah, he'll fit in. Yeah, go and ask him. So a recorder's busy that Sunday morning. He rushes up and says, look, would you mind helping out with the Gospel Advancement Committee? Or would you like to go on the social committee? And the person's caught on the spot and they say, look, I'm too busy or whatever, see? There's a way to do it, isn't there? That's not the way to do it. If you want that person to feel the value of what you're speaking about, it really needs more than one of the arranging brethren to be interested in that. And say, you know, did Brother Recorder see you out to so-and-so? Oh, it doesn't matter if he has or he hasn't really. It's always best perhaps if he has, but if he hasn't, it's still saying that person that the arranging brethren are very interested in that matter. And the appointment of the right person, and we really think you are the right person for that job. It puts, therefore, value upon the office. It's just a very wise way to do it, rather than just in the helter-skelter of events, just shoot out invitations here, there and everywhere, and wonder sometimes why people are not all that keen to take the office on. But if the picture is built and seen to be an integral part of ecclesial life, a valuable part, then the person that's asked to do that will say, yes, I see the point. This is good. I'd like to help out in that capacity. So, you know, just little things like that. David was very clever, wasn't he? Very clever. Who would have thought to bring out the secretaries of the singing class and sit up their sons in front of the generals of the army? They must have thought, what's he know about playing a harp or a violin or something, or cymbals? But you see, he had a greater concept in mind. Very clever person. Very clever. All right. So, chapter 23 and verse 2, he gathered together all the princes of Israel, and he's going to reorganize the Levites and among them the priests. And so he does it in an auspicious manner. Now, I think this is just a wonderful thing, my dear brothers and sisters. I know this is all names, and I don't want to make the study too bitty, but I really want us to feel the power of what David's doing. Would you be concerned in the last years of your life, and you've had years in your bed, absolutely worn out to a sottle, and would you want to be bothered with 38,000 people that needed reorganisation? Because that's how many Levites there were. 38,000. I mean, that's like being the chief administrative officer in a multinational company, isn't it? 38,000 men. He's going to get hold of them. He's going to reorganise their lives. He's going to spruce up their officers, and they're going to have to know exactly what positions they've got. And those officers are going to have to be attended with a new shine and a new interest. And he's going to have to convey, as king, he's going to have to convey to them his interest in what is being done. And don't tell me you know, arranging brethren, once they're past 70, are out in the paddock. I really get a little vexed by... what are you laughing for, Bob? I thought he'd be crying. You know, we ought to think about that, because there is a tendency in our society just to put people, you know, when they get into their maybe 50s or 60s. It couldn't be 50s, I know that, but but to just sort of put them out in the paddock. And I think that is just so wrong. I couldn't think of anything I'd value more in our ecclesia than if we had 3 70-year-olds sitting on our AB. I'd love that. I really would. Because they have gone through the heat and burden of the day. And I think in terms of young folks' positions and so on, if you've got an older brother who's involved with the young people and he's brought his children through, he's got an immense amount to offer in that place, and let alone on the arranging board. I grew up in a meeting where many of the arranging brethren were older brethren. It was a very good thing. You know, a 60-year-old man, a 70-year-old man today is not worn out. And in many cases, look, there's a lot of smiles coming from earlier. They have a lot of sagacity to offer our meeting. And their stability of life, having gone through times when the world was very different, offers a lot to our younger meetings and to the younger people in our meetings. So I just mentioned that. David was old in terms of administration, but he had the zeal to go with it, and what an inspiration he was. So just bear that in mind. Now it says in verse 3 that the Levites were numbered from the age of 30 years and upward. Actually, David increased that, and if you look across to verse 27, you'll see by the last words of David, the Levites were numbered from 20 years old and above. 30 was the time that was given back in Numbers. We won't go back there because it's just a sort of technical matter, but the references are back in Numbers chapter 4, verse 3 and verse 47, where it was from 30 to 50 years. And it says there, and their number by their polls, man by man, was 38,000. That's a lot of people that were numbered in that age group. Of which, and here's the division, if you've got a little piece of paper, just write this down. So we've got a picture of it, see? 38,000, that's the total number of the Levites. 24,000 were to set forward the work of the house of Yahweh. 24,000. You just think how many people that is. That's a lot of people, isn't it? 24,000. And note the number 24, it's 2 by 12. And in the chapter we read today, we had 24 courses of the singers. And in the chapter in between, which is chapter 24, there's 24 courses of the priests. So it's not accidental that it says 24,000 were to set forward the work of the house of Yahweh. See, they were obviously in courses, weren't they? 1,000 Levites and a course of the priests and a course of the singers. They were obviously in groups that worked together like that. What a beautiful organisation. Would you like to be thinking about that at his age and at his health circumstances? But you had to get all those families rounded up so that they knew exactly when they were coming onto their course. No good saying, oh, look, I can get there next Tuesday if you're supposed to be there Monday morning. They had to be there, ready for their office. They couldn't swap with someone else. It was their job to be there. And organise their life, therefore, accordingly to fit in with what the king was organising over all the land. What an amazing man he was. It's the work of God. This comes first, and you've got to fit in with this, is what he was saying. I'm reorganising this whole thing. It's not going to be on some shambles sort of organisation. It's going to have a very distinct organisation, and this is it. So he pulled that nation together. I find that just absolutely inspiring, my dear friends. How many of us sometimes feel that our ecclesia is a little bit weary, eh? And you wonder if you've got the zeal and the courage and the strength to sort of get the thing going again, really organised, where there's a real passion in the meeting. Well, there's inspiration, isn't it? What if your roll in your ecclesia was 38,000? You'd feel a bit weary, wouldn't you? Too big a task. How could I ever be bothered with it all? But the inspiration of David is that whilst the work was enormous, he nevertheless put his hand to it because he could see that great building was going to arise. And it had to be therefore properly conducted. So he was going to get all those people properly organised into their positions. 24,000 to set forward the work of the house of Yahweh. And it shows you something too of the size of that house, doesn't it? I mean, what does 1,000 people around a house do? If they're in courses of 1,000 each. That's a lot of people around a place, isn't it? Around a building, a lot of people. What are they all doing? It was a very busy place indeed. And a lot of work to be done. And David therefore had this amazing number of people that were involved in the temple and in its service. And their number by their names, man by man, was 38,000, of which 24,000 were to set forward the work of the house of Yahweh. And secondly, 6,000 were officers and judges. 6,000 were officers and judges. Now that's an amazing number of judges, isn't it? And you might remember how that in the 2nd of Chronicles, chapter 16, in the days of Jehoshaphat, we have an excellent example of how the virtue of those people was seen. In the 2nd of Chronicles, chapter 16, That's not right, is it? 26, is it? Second Chronicles 19, verse 6. Verse 5 and 6. And he set judges in the land throughout all the fenced cities of Judah, city by city, and said to the judges, take heed what ye do, for ye judge not for man, but for Yahweh who is with you in the judgment. It's a very beautiful expression, isn't it? You judge for Yahweh who is with you in the judgment. Just keep your hand there and look at Psalm 82, which is a psalm about these people. This was a psalm of Asaph, one of the principal singers, who obviously was more than a singer, but a very spiritually minded man as well. In Psalm 82 it says, God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the Elohim, the gods. And that's the expression that Jesus is borrowing when he says to the Jews of his day, does it not say in your law, I said ye are gods? And that's in verse 6. This is to the judges of Israel who were called Elohim because God's name was upon them to give to the people the judgments and principles of God. So verse 1 then reads, Elohim, the mighty ones, these people thus appointed, standeth in the congregation of the Ale. He judgeth among the Elohim. So there were judges that were judging Israel. And what the psalm says, beware, because God is your judge. People come to you and you give them verdict. But you are standing in the presence of the Ale himself. So the Elohim, the judges in Israel, were those who stood before God and would receive their judgment of him as they gave judgment unto others. And therefore their judgment needed to be just. That's, of course, based, isn't it, upon Exodus, where they were called Elohim for the first time. The Lord knew that, didn't he? He just picked it out in John chapter 10, verse 30, just plucked that statement straight out of the record and said, does it not say in your law that ye are judges, that ye are gods? He knew all those little details, didn't he? He knew his Bible. And so that's how we ought to be. And so in the days of Jehoshaphat, when things had not been done quite right and he wanted to bring that nation back, he then used these people for that office. So there's our 6,000 officers and judges in all the cities of Judah and of Israel. And the psalm gives us illustration of their responsibilities. Now coming back to 1 Chronicles 23, we've got 38,000, 24,000, or rather 24,000 were in the work of the house, 6,000 officers and judges. And then in verse 5 it says, moreover, 4,000 were porters. They were really doorkeepers. They were also about the house, but about the keeping of the doors. They kept the sanctity of God's house, the atmosphere of that house. They were guardians to that house. And we will have a look at them later on. 4,000 of them. How many doors did this temple have? How many gates were there? 4,000 people involved in it. Well, they weren't always at the temple. They were also in courses. In fact, all of these Levites, all of these priests, they were not public servants full time, so to speak. They also had their normal life as well. They weren't lounging upon the nation. They had to conduct their own affairs. And so they were giving a part of their life to the service of God. So 4,000 praised Yahweh with instruments is the next statement in verse 5. And the chapter that deals with them is chapter 25. So you can see what these subsequent chapters are doing. If you look at chapter 26, that's all about the porters. So we had 4,000 porters, and their chapter is chapter 26. And we had 4,000 singers, or those that praised Yahweh with instruments, and their chapter of organisation is chapter 25. And we had the priests as well, and their chapter is chapter 24. So you can see that chapter 23 is now going to be expanded, and the organisational structure and the names involved is going to be outlined in the subsequent chapters of 1 Chronicles 23. So you can see that this whole section of Scripture, 1 Chronicles 21, 1 Chronicles 29, is all set in the last part of David's life and is speaking about his reorganisation of the whole city, really, and in particular of the Levites that were about the service of God. A new house was going to need a great more organisation than had been before. And it says in verse 6 that David divided them into courses among the sons of Levi, namely Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Now, just for the purpose of picking up the structure of this, I'd like you to have that little piece of paper again, if you've got it, and just put Levi, and then 3 arrows down from Levi. If I put this on a transparency, you'll look at it once and forget it. But if you write it down, you'll remember it. So Levi. And he has 3 sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And the scripture says that David divided them into courses among the sons, the 3 sons. So if this chapter is going to be about the Levites, and it is, chapter 23, then it's going to tell you about some of the sons of Gershon who were principally involved, and some of the sons of Kohath who were principals among the Levites, and some of the sons of Merari who were principal sons of Levi. And so he does also with the porters and with the singers. They will come from each of those main divisions of the Levites. So to get that picture clear in your mind is important, isn't it? Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And from these, and from these, and from these, he would take certain particular people to be principals of the Levites generally in the work of the house, to be principals in the porter area or doorkeeping area, principals also in the singing area. That's how he structured it. Of course, the priests came only from one line. They came from the line of Aaron, who was among the sons of Kohath. Now, this became, therefore, a very important structure in the whole of Israel's future. And for centuries, that structure was preserved. And if you come to 2 Chronicles, which is really turning over all the period of the Davidic kingdom, in the 2 Chronicles chapter 35, you'll see how important that became. Second Chronicles 35 and verse 4. We've gone right over to Josiah, who's getting towards the end of the kingdom of Judah. And this is what it says. And prepare yourselves, verse 4, by the houses of your fathers. He says as he speaks to the Levites and the priests, after your courses, according to the writing of David, king of Israel, and according to the writing of Solomon, his son. Now, isn't that instructive? We've turned over 300 odd years. And there is the comment which Josiah says to his people. So what we're reading back here in 1 Chronicles 23, 24, 25 and 26 is going to be an organisational structure that will be implemented for 300 years and will always be recognised as having been laid down by the hand of David's writing and Solomon after him, who obviously established that even further. Isn't that interesting? Very interesting. So it wasn't just up to Hezekiah to say, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to reorganise the place this way. Like, one government comes in, one party goes out, and you get a complete change of the way the government's run. That's how it is in Australia. You don't really know how to turn up the telephone book anymore because you don't know where you're going to find this particular office of the government. It's all changing, isn't it? Our world's just changing like crazy. Same here, is it? Yeah, same everywhere, isn't it? Madness in the world. But in the days of David, there was something laid down that was by divine decree, and it was established. And Josiah, who had respect to that, he resurrected that and said, this is how it's going to be done, according to my ancient father's direction, because God gave him that. In the 2nd Chronicles 8, verse 14, now that doesn't mean to say, my dear brothers and sisters, that in ecclesial life there can't be any change. I tell you what it does mean to me. It meant, and I'd like our younger brethren to hear this. What it does mean to me is that we ought to have respect, at least, for the way things have been done. If you want ecclesial peace and harmony, have respect to the way that older brethren have seen fit to do things. It doesn't mean to say that's always perfect. God did not tell us by divine decree how to do it. But surely, if you want peace in your meeting, it is right that a younger brother respects what has been. Isn't that true? It must be true. Absolutely must be true. Any movement that doesn't respect its pioneers is going to be a movement that just goes off the rails. It must mean that, mustn't it? When you stop and think about it. Because God is working in our midst. Yeah, well, he was working in their midst too. And this is the way that things were done, and they were done very well for many, many years. If we live therefore in an age that's turning over, don't get caught up with that age. The odds are that it's going to be doing a lot of things very wrongly as far as God's concerned, or totally unrelated to the principles of God. But that wasn't the case with our grandparents. They were God-fearing men who saw fit to do it in certain ways. Doesn't mean to say everything was perfect. Doesn't mean that at all. But it does mean, if ecclesial peace is going to be realised, that the younger generation has respect. Like Josiah had respect, didn't he? Absolute respect. And he never ever knew David. Hundreds of years from the background. But he had absolute respect for that. And you know, they even had the same instruments. They didn't change the instruments. Incredible. David made it this way. That's how it be made. In the 2nd Chronicles 8, this is the days of Solomon. Solomon was a brilliant young boy. He could make up his own charter, surely. He didn't need to rely upon anybody. How did he need to walk in the steps of anyone? Well, you have a look in 2 Chronicles 8. 2 Chronicles 8, verse 14. Brilliant young man. But he appointed according to the order of David his father. Isn't that lovely? I love that. According to the order of David his father. I'd love my boys and I'd love my daughters to think like that. Not because it's me, but because of the principle involved. That's how really we need to be in ecclesial life, to teach our children to respect their elders so that they have a desire to uphold what their fathers and their grandfathers and other fathers in the faith have stood for, because that's a good thing. Here's Solomon, with all his brilliance. Was there ever a sharper mind in Israel than that? But according to the principles of Dad, what Dad established, the courses of the priests to their service, the Levites to their charge, all the details. To praise and minister before the priests as the duty of the priests, as the duty of every day required. The porters also by the courses at every gate. For so had David, the man of God, commanded. That's impressive, isn't it? Very impressive indeed to see the detail that is given there. Now, if you come back into the 1st Chronicles 28, you'll see that David did in fact receive that pattern. You might say, well, he saw the pattern of the temple. That's true. But he saw more than that. He saw how the place would work. Verse 11, 1 Chronicles 28, David gave to Solomon his son the pattern of the porch and of the houses thereof and of the treasuries and of the upper chambers and of the inner parlours and of the place of the mercy seat. So not just saw, the very holy place and most holy place, did he? He saw the whole structure of that temple, right down to the storehouses and the place where people would live. And what's more, verse 12, and the pattern of all that he had by the Spirit of the courts of the house of the Lord, and of all the chambers round about, of the treasuries of the house of God, and of the treasuries of the dedicated thing. Also, for the courses of the priests and the Levites, and for all the work of the service of the house of the Lord, and for all the vessels of service in the house of the Lord. And therefore he's able to put these various matters of substance, the gold and the silver and so forth that was necessary. He could work out the amounts that were required. That's why in verses 14 to 18 he was able to work out all the amount of metals that were required and stones, because he had the little drawings of all of these things. I said drawings. Look at verse 19. All this, said David, the Lord made me understand in writing by his hand upon me, even all the works of this pattern. Isn't that beautiful? That really is a very beautiful thing, isn't it? To put that whole picture together shows that what David was instigating was not something dreamt up out of his own mind, but something that God had given him. He'd caused his hand to write it out. Even down to the vessels and the treasuries and the place where people would live and all the other apartments that were related to the temple. What an amazing thing it was. And yet now he's an old man, he has to implement that, bring it in. Incredible, it's an incredible concept. And you know, my dear brothers and sisters, as you think about that, you're realizing this surely, that when God's hand, when God's Spirit comes upon David and he writes that out, what would God have in mind? Is this the greatest temple? Is this the greatest king? Really, his mind is full of the future yet again, isn't it? It's the greater temple in Jerusalem with the greater son of David that really is the ultimate that God must have in mind. True? He cannot surely give something to David in those times that's not going to reflect what will be in the future. Of course not. No more than you and I, who might set something before our children. We've got an ultimate concept with them. We're not going to set something that's going off in this direction if we want them to go there, are we? We're going to set them something here. We might say, well, that's as much as they can take in for this time. But in the end, I know it's going to develop to that full picture in the end. So we have a bit of a treasure here in Chronicles, don't we? It's a treasure of how things will be in the kingdom, I'm sure. In fact, I can't think of any other way in which we could get some way, some picture of how Jerusalem will work, apart from Ezekiel's description at the end of his prophecy. I can't think of any better way of seeing how the priests and others will work together than these old chapters in Chronicles. These chapters of many words and many big long names and that are so difficult to understand. And yet there is a precious value to them, because they are outlining to us that in the kingdom to come, things are going to be done according to a very strict protocol. And it will be given by God, and it will be kept up. And people will come to understand that. One generation to another will understand that's how things are done in the temple in Jerusalem when Christ is king. That's why in the book of Revelation there are 24 elders. Surely that 24 is based on the fact that there were 24 priests and 24 courses of the singers, 24 courses of the gatekeepers and so on. 24,000 of the Levites. It's interesting, isn't it? Obviously, when God caused that to be written, he had the great picture in mind. And so here is a lovely way of seeing how things will be organised in the kingdom. So there's a treasure in these old chapters in Chronicles. So when you come to the readings next time and your little children say, oh, do we have to read this one, Mum and Dad? Say, well, there's a secret in here, and it's telling us about things to come, even if it's about details of the past. Now, I said that he took various people from the different divisions of Levi, and those divisions were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, verse 6. Now, look how the chapter's organised. Verse 7, of the Gershonites. Of the Gershonites. Verse 12, the sons of Kohath, which was the second one mentioned. And verse 21, of the sons of Merari. So there's the structure of the chapter. Three main divisions of the Levites: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Gershon, verse 7, Kohath, verse 12, and Merari, verse 21. And from there are 24 who are chosen out. You've got, for example, in verse 8, you've got 3 mentioned. Just perhaps ring that little 3 with a pencil if you like. And in verse 9, you've got of the sons of Shimei, 3 particular persons who were going to be preeminent among the 24,000. And then in verse 10, it says, these 4 were the sons of Shimei. So you've got 3 plus 3 is 6 plus 4 is 10. And then if you come down to verse 16, you've got another one mentioned. And his name is Shebuel. And another one mentioned in verse 17. So we're up to 12, aren't we? And verse 18 is another one mentioned, the chief. And in verse 19 it mentions another 4. And in verse 20 there's another 2, the second, see? And there's 2 in verse 21, and there's 3 in verse 23. If you add those up, it comes to 24. So they obviously, from those 3 principal divisions of the Kohathites, they were the 24 elders among the Levites, among the 24,000. So 1,000 in each group, 24 leaders of 1,000 each. Isn't that interesting? Now, would you want to worry about that when you were in his condition of health? But David got to that, didn't he? Got his mind onto it, organised himself, and approached that with great interest, and he got that all implemented in Israel. Well, it was a little more involved than that, wasn't it? Because we missed out the bracket in between. And it says in verse 12, the sons of Kohath were Amram. So where you've got your little diagram, Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Now make 4 arrows down from Kohath. And the names of those 4 arrows are, verse 12, Amram, Izhar, and Hebron, and Uzziel. So Kohath had 4 sons, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Now Izhar has one of his sons chosen in verse 18. See that? Hebron has 4 of his sons chosen in verse 19. I just ran a little line down and joined the 2 up so I could always see that. And Uzziel, he had 2 in verse 20. So the chapter's got a lot of structure to it, hasn't it? Kohath, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Well, what about Amram? Well, we know who Amram was. He's the father of Moses. Father of Moses and Aaron. And so we read in verse 13, the sons of Amram, Aaron and Moses. He puts Moses aside and says, and Aaron was separated that he should sanctify the most holy things, he and his sons forever, to burn incense before Yahweh, to minister unto him, and to bless in his name forever. There's the 4 things that are noted of the priesthood of the sons of Aaron. Sanctify the most holy things, burn incense, minister unto him, and to bless in his name forever. The priests were separated for that work, and their chapter is the next one, chapter 24. All right. So that helps us to see that there is a structure in the First of Chronicles chapter 23. Now there's a few general descriptions about the duties of the Levites. These were the sons of Levi, verse 24, after the house of their fathers, even the chief of the fathers, as they were counted by number of names by their polls, that did the work for the service of the house of the Lord from the age of 20 years and upward. For David said, the Lord God of Israel hath given rest unto his people, that they may dwell in Jerusalem forever. Rather, and he dwells in Jerusalem forever. And you'll see that the margin actually renders it that way. So does the RSV. Makes sense, doesn't it? The Lord God of Israel hath given rest unto his people, and he dwells in Jerusalem forever. That's why we're getting organised. Because the Lord God of Israel is coming home, as it were, to rest in Jerusalem. We've got to be ready for that. We've got to have things done properly. This can't be just lackadaisical. This has got to be done properly. And so we're reorganising. Wasn't David a wonderful man of God, my dear brothers and sisters? He saw the scope of what was involved and he thought, oh, if the Lord God of Israel is going to come into this, the capital city, then this city's got to run right and things have got to be done properly. I wonder how much of that is lost today in our ecclesial life, in the sanctity of our meetings. I don't think our meetings need to be stiff or cold, formal to that degree. I don't like that. But I do think that there should be a sanctity in our meetings. You know, there's a certain discipline in our meetings so that concentration can be good, so that people know they're about something serious. We don't just sort of turn up to the meetings like we turn up to a picnic, or like as if we're going down the beach. It's just not right, is it? Just isn't the way we should do things. We've never done things that way. It's only really our modern world that does things like that. And we don't have to conform to that. We're really separated, aren't we, to a different and a holy calling. And in our brotherhood all across the world, my dear brothers and sisters, we need to be careful of those things. Not to make that the big issue, but nevertheless to preserve the sanctity of our meetings. Even what our children do in the hall. It's not a place for games. You know, you don't play cricket in the hall. Or is it baseball? That'd be even a bit more dangerous, wouldn't it? There should be a proper environment in our hall that teaches, or even our children, that this is a place where we worship God and where we learn about the things of God and we keep the sanctity of the meeting. That's how David felt. God's going to come into Jerusalem. Well, I've got to get this place right. Got to have everybody organised. They've got to feel it. They've got to be touched by this. This is too wonderful that this is going to happen. Wasn't he a beautiful man? He really was, a man of God. Great fear of God in his heart. And it says in verse 26, and also unto the Levites, they shall no more carry the tabernacle nor any vessels of it for the service thereof, because it's coming to stay. For by the last words of David, the Levites were numbered from 20 years old and above. Because their office was to wait on the sons of Aaron for the service of the house of Yahweh in the courts and in the chambers and the purifying of all holy things and the work of the service for the house of God. Look at all the things that they had to be about. Both for the showbread and for the fine flour for meat offering, and for the unleavened cakes, and for that which is baked in the pan, and for that which is fried, and for all manner of measure and size. You know, I never had much idea of what it was involved in the offerings of the temple until one time on a little piece of land I had, we lost an animal. It's always the best one you lose, and this was the best one in the herd. And we lost this animal, you see. Beautiful cow it was. And I thought, what am I going to do with that? And the neighbour says, well, you burn it up, you see. So I thought, all right, we'll burn it up. So I got this wood together, and as I was putting this wood on the animal, and it was all bloated, of course, because it's been there a day or two, I began to realise what a tremendous work this was to put fire to an animal and devour it. Have you ever done it? Who's done it? Anybody done it? It's an amazing job. You need half a forest to burn an animal. It's absolutely amazing how much wood you need to consume the animal. This was just a full-grown cow, and I came back a couple of hours later and the thing's still burning and all the wood was gone, so I heaped a whole lot more wood on. I came back a couple of days later, I had to do the same again. Came back a couple of days later, still enough. And I began to have some idea of what was actually involved. You know, when it speaks in the law of hundreds of offerings, sometimes thousands of offerings, those men would have been working like Trojans to get through that work. And every day that was coming up to the place of the temple. Those Levites had to really work. And you can understand why there was all these people, why it had to be organised. If it couldn't be handled, then it wouldn't happen. People say, oh, there's no use taking your animal up there. You have to wait for a week before it's offered. It had to be done then, didn't it? It had to be done properly. How do you kill an animal? You say you take it off to the abattoirs. You say the slaughterhouse, don't you? And you don't know what happens there, do you? But how do you kill an animal? Here's a bullock. And he's full grown. He weighs 1,000 kilograms. Here you are, here's the knife. You go and kill him. How do you do that? Very difficult, isn't it? He's not going to like it. He's not going to stand there for you. You're going to have some very strong ties around that animal to be able to achieve that. And then you're going to have to butcher the parts, take it apart. and inspect. It was a lot of work, an enormous amount of work. And I began to realise just how much wood would be involved. That has to come from the forests all around, doesn't it? So there were wood offerings. You read about them, don't you? Nehemiah, you read about them, Malachi. So it was a very large institution, very busy, and had to be so because people were continually coming with their concerns. I'll tell you another thing would make you think, wouldn't it? If you take a big animal like that up to the temple because you had sinned, you'd think twice about sinning another time too. I never thought of that until that happened to me. You'd really stop and think, eh? Going to break God's law again? Well, you better be careful because it's going to cost you something. So there were all these people that were involved. But there were other things too. Verse 30. And to stand every morning to thank and praise Yahweh, and likewise at even. The temple was a lovely place to go to. To stand every morning to thank and praise Yahweh, and likewise at even. So it was a place of song and of happiness of heart, of uplift of spirit. It was a beautiful place. The high priest would be going past and he'd hear the bells ringing on his garments. And there was an alacrity about what they were doing. And these men that were given to song and to praise. It wasn't a starchy old place. It was a place where the nerve centre of the nation would be felt, and God was there. And so they had to be in respect to that, and to offer all burnt sacrifices unto Yahweh in the Sabbaths. Look at all the things they had to remember. Young men, many of them, but they had to remember what you did on the Sabbath, and when you did it, and how you did it, and who did it, and what day. In the new moons, there were special sacrifices for the turning of the month. And on the set feasts, 3 times a year. There were set feasts and they all had their various offerings. And the boys had to know when that was and do it properly. By number, according to the order commanded unto them continually before Yahweh. It wasn't a little spot effort or a Bible school and it was all over. It went on through the year. And that they should keep the charge of the tabernacle of the congregation and the charge of the holy place and the charge of the sons of Aaron, their brethren, in the service of the house of the Lord. So it was a great work, my dear brothers and sisters, and in that we can see something of what's going to be in the future and what a busy place Jerusalem is going to be. Be a place of joy and of happiness and singing and praise. It's going to be busy too, isn't it? When people are coming from all nations to Jerusalem to worship. And at that time it's going to be up to us to know the protocols and to be able to lead those people. It says in Zechariah, doesn't it? They shall go to him that is a Jew and take hold of him and say, we will go with thee, for we have heard that God is with you. What about the saints? Israel are going to learn in part from the saints, aren't they? That's you and me. But what if we haven't done our daily readings now? What if we're slack in attendance of our Bible class? What if we don't think it's any need any longer to put out lectures and we don't really know these things? And somebody tugged at our skirt and said, look, tell me, I used to learn about the Trinity, but how does it go? I say, Trinity? Oh, I'm not sure, mate. I forget now. I was baptised a lot of years ago. I mean, that's not what a saint's going to do, is he? He's going to be able to open the book and say, look, this is what it says in the Scriptures. And we're going to be able to do that then because we know it now. This is the day of preparation. So we're in for wonderful things, my dear brothers and sisters, in the future, and let us prepare diligently for that time. Thank you.